When my son pulled over on that lonely stretch of Highway 92 and told me to get out of the car, I thought he was joking. The sun was dipping behind the pines, spilling molten gold across the hood, the way it used to when we drove to the lake in summers past. Only this time, the air between us was sharp enough to cut. "Mom," Caleb said, his voice tight like a guitar string about to snap, "I think it's better if you walk from here." I laughed. At least, something that sounded like a laugh came out of my mouth. "Very funny," I said, glancing at the rearview mirror for the bags of groceries we'd just bought. Still there. Still needing to be put away before the milk spoiled. Now drive before the ice cream melts. But his knuckles stayed white around the steering wheel. "I'm serious, Mom." The words didn't land at first. They hovered in the space between us, like smoke from a fire I hadn't yet smelled. "You're serious?" "Yeah." He wouldn't meet my eyes. The breeze through the cracked passenger window carried the scent of damp earth and distant rain. I looked outside. No houses, no lights, just miles of trees hemming in the two-lane road. The sound of an engine far in the distance, maybe a logging truck. "Why would you want me to walk? We're 20 minutes from town," I said, keeping my voice calm, like maybe I could talk him down from this cliff edge we were both teetering on. He shifted in his seat, the seat I'd saved for 2 months of overtime to buy him last Christmas when his old sedan gave out. I can't have you at the house right now." That was when my pulse began to drum in my ears. Not at the words themselves, but at the way he said them. Like he'd rehearsed, like they'd been approved by someone else before they reached me. "Not have me at the house? Caleb, I've been living there since March. You said." "It's different now," he cut in. And there it was, the hairline crack in his voice, the giveaway that there was more to this than he wanted to say. I knew it the same way I knew the smell of burning toast meant the toaster was about to die, or the way I knew the tight smile he gave me at 13 meant he was hiding a bad grade. "Different how?" I asked. He swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed once, twice. "Mara's back." The name hit me like a fist to the ribs. Mara, the ex-girlfriend who disappeared 2 years ago with a trunk full of his savings and a trail of credit card debt in her wake. Mara, the woman I'd called a parasite once, not realizing she was behind me in the kitchen doorway. I blinked, the light from the setting sun making my eyes water. "You're telling me you're taking her back?" His grip on the steering wheel tightened again. "She's different now." "She's different now," I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "And that means what exactly?" "That I'm out on the side of the road like yesterday's trash." He flinched at that but didn't deny it. I glanced out the window again. Still no traffic, still no lights. Only the sound of wind rattling the dry leaves and the far-off cry of a hawk. "You think she's going to let me stay under your roof? After everything?" I said quietly. Caleb's silence was the answer. The groceries in the back seat suddenly felt absurd. Loaves of bread, chicken breasts, a bunch of green onions leaning out of the paper bag like they were watching the scene unfold. I'd bought them with my last $40 until payday, planning to stretch them into a week's worth of meals for the two of us. Now they were his, or hers. The thought sat heavy in my chest, heavier than my purse in my lap, heavier than the gathering shadows pressing against the windshield. He finally turned to look at me, and the shame in his eyes was almost worse than anger would have been. "I'm sorry, Mom. I just can't have both of you there. It's easier if—" "Easier for who?" I asked. The sound of tires on gravel broke the silence as he eased the car onto the shoulder. The vehicle rocked slightly, the kind of movement that makes you instinctively reach for the armrest. I kept my hands folded in my lap instead. "Easier for her," he admitted. I studied him. My son, my only child, the boy I'd raised after his father vanished before his 5th birthday. The boy I'd worked double shifts for, sold my jewelry for, gone without winter coats for so he could have new soccer cleats. The boy who now wouldn't drive me the last 20 minutes home because it would upset a woman who'd once stolen from him. "I see," I said, and unbuckled my seatbelt. He looked like he wanted to say something else, maybe even to stop me, but he didn't. The door handle was cold against my palm. When I stepped out, The sudden quiet of the roadside wrapped around me like a heavy coat. The air was cooler now, carrying the smell of pine sap and damp leaves. I closed the door gently, not slamming it, not giving him the satisfaction of a scene. "Mom," he said through the open window. I'll call you in a few days." I met his gaze through the fading light. "Don't bother," I said and turned away. The engine roared back to life. I didn't watch him drive off, but I heard the crunch of gravel under the tires, the shift to asphalt, the hum as the sound faded into the distance. When the road went silent again, I stood there for a long moment, my shadow stretching across the gravel shoulder like it was trying to follow him. Somewhere deep down, past the hurt, past the disbelief, a thought began to take root. If he thought leaving me here would break me, he had no idea who he was dealing with. The reason he'd done this, well, that was going to matter a lot less to him than what I was going to do next. By the time the sky turned the color of bruised peaches, I'd walked 2 miles. The road narrowed and the shoulder dissolved into ditch, so I kept to the hard line of gravel, counting the crunches under my soles like a litany. 108. 109. A truck passed once, rattling my bones and sending up a tail of dust that settled in my hair. No one stopped. Good. I didn't want witnesses to the moment my heart rerouted itself. There was a bait and gas place at the bend before town. A squat building with a flickering open sign and a handwritten note on the door. Cash only when it rains. It wasn't raining. The bell chimed when I went in. The air smelled like coffee, rubber, and minnows. "You look like you wrestled a pine tree and lost," the clerk said, not unkindly. His name tag read LOU. "Tree won?" I said, feeling the dust on my cheeks crack when I smiled. He slid a bottle of water across the counter before I could ask. "On the house." I took it like sacrament. There was a payphone by the bathroom, the kind that hasn't worked since the first Obama term, more sculpture than utility. I had my cell in my purse. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over Caleb's name. I could already hear the version of his voice that would pick up. Soothing, practiced, saying, "It's complicated, Mom, you don't understand, it's easier if—" I put the phone away. Outside, dusk had deepened into the color of secrets. I walked the last mile into town, past the mill, past the church sign that still advertised last month's potluck, past the hardware store where Mr. Klein once let Caleb take home a pocketknife with, "If you promise your mother you'll only cut rope." He'd cut his thumb instead, and we'd eaten popsicles on the porch until the bleeding stopped. He'd been 8 then. Mara didn't exist except as a future somebody's daughter. I took a room at the Suncrest Motel because it was $49 and had a deadbolt that worked. The bedspread bore a geometric pattern that had given up on itself. I sat on the edge and took off my shoes. A tide came in. I thought it would be tears, but it was numbers. The first year, I paid $950 every month toward Caleb's rent when he was laid off from the tire plant. $11,400. Groceries? $120 a week, 52 weeks times 2 years because, Mom, you know Mara's gluten-free and grass-fed isn't cheap. $12,480. Car insurance I added him to because bundle saves money. $138 a month for 26 months. $3,588. The phone plan, mine, because his credit was a sieve, $1.65 a month for 31 months. $2,015. The deposit when the landlord wanted 1.5, and his wallet offered half of half. $1,800 for my tax refund. The emergency dentist bill after a bar fight he swore he didn't start. $640. I took the motel's ballpoint from the nightstand Bible and totted it up on the back of the receipt for room 12. $31,923. Not counting the time, the dinners, the rides at 2 a.m. when cars died and people disappointed. Not counting the piece of myself I peeled off every time I told him it would be okay. This part is important. Writing those numbers didn't make me feel petty. It made me feel awake. I pulled my phone back out and opened the banking app. My thumbprint took me in. Automatic transfers, 2 of them. Sat like obedient dogs waiting for commands. $250 on the first to C Heart Utilities. That was the power bill Mara insisted be put in my name, just to help build a little history. $90 on the 15th to a gym I'd never stepped foot in because babe needs Pilates to keep her back from locking up. I clicked edit on one, cancel on the other. Confirm? Yes. The screen flashed. Changes saved. I stared at those words until my pulse slowed. I hadn't saved their changes in years. Tonight I'd saved mine. Next, the phone plan. I scrolled to manage lines. There he was, Caleb, and under it, the line I tacked on for Mara when she said, "It's just temporary until my check clears." Temporary had a way of stretching around her like elastic. I moved her line to pending suspension, set the date for Friday at midnight, and took a breath that tasted like minted courage. The door vibrated once. A bass thump from someone's TV next door. I imagined a laugh track, imagined the joke. Watch the mother figure make boundary soup. Add salt to taste. My phone buzzed. Not Caleb. A number I didn't know with a city code we don't use. Hello. My voice sounded like someone else's patience. You got in okay? The voice was female, smooth, and familiar in the way a bad dream is familiar when you wake. Mara. I didn't answer. Silence is a blade used right. Listen, she continued. I'm calling about logistics. We're changing the locks tomorrow. It's not personal, it's just, I don't want you popping by and making things weird while I'm moving my things back in. You can pick up your boxes. She said boxes like they smelled. Saturday morning before noon. My boxes, I said, and let the words sit there. Yes, and the key. Caleb says you've still got the copy I gave you when I did the reorg of the drawers. She laughed. An empty little bell. Anyway, be a doll and leave it on the porch. Oh, and could you swing by the pharmacy? I'm out of my vitamins and I pressed the phone to my cheek and said nothing. 30 seconds of my breath and her impatience. Hello? She said. Are you there? I am, I said. One more thing, Mara. When you go through my boxes, keep your hands off anything that isn't yours. She lowered her voice like she believed she had one to lower. Don't be dramatic. You know, if you'd been nicer about me before, none of this would be necessary. Perhaps, I said. Good night, Mara. I ended the call. I put the phone face down and enjoyed the small click, like the lid of something finally snapping shut. The motel clock blinked 9:47 in digital red. I made coffee with the machine that thought it was a kettle and stood by the window watching the highway's thin ribbon of cars. Across the street, teenagers loitered outside the taco truck, shoulders touching, their laughter rising in the kind of column you want to warm your hands around. Somewhere in the distance, a train announced itself. I thought of Maria, the train, not a person, the way it once sounded to me like possibility and lately like warning. I opened Facebook without meaning to, muscle memory more than choice. Caleb's profile picture was still the two of us at the lake, my arm around his waist, his chin tipping toward me like we shared a secret. He hadn't posted in months. Mara had. A lot. Her latest. Welcome back dinner this Sunday. Family only. A gold-rimmed table setting, candles, a centerpiece of eucalyptus that looked like it cost more than groceries. 12 RSVPs. My throat went cold the way a window goes cold when you press your hand to it. Family only. I clicked about and saw a new entry under work. Administrative coordinator at Holloway Clinic. That wasn't a job. That was a stage. I clicked events. The clinic's winter fundraiser was next weekend at the Foundry. Dress code, cocktail. Donor list public. My eyes snagged on a name. Evan Holloway. Founder, widower, philanthropist, and, if gossip in this town runs true, Mara's former boss. I let the information settle the way flour does when you whack the bag. Cloud, then drift, then wait. There was a folder in my tote labeled taxes that held everything but pay stubs, receipts, notes I'd scrawled on envelopes while on hold with insurance. I added tonight's motel receipt to the pile and pulled out the original lease from March, the one where the landlord insisted on a guarantor, because of prior balances. My signature smiled up at me like a woman trying to be agreeable. On the second page, under additional occupants, Caleb had written mother, temporary, underlined twice. I ran a finger over the letters and felt something crackle beneath like static. On the last page, a clause I'd skimmed then read now. Guarantor may revoke guarantee with 60 days written notice. Tenant will be required to secure alternate guarantee or forfeit lease. I circled it with a motel pen hard enough to dent the paper. Not tonight, Mara. But soon. Another number pinged my screen. A text from a contact that wasn't a contact. Unknown. A single line. Check the yellow folder on the top shelf of the hall closet. Don't tell her I told you. See. My first instinct was relief. A flare so bright it hurt. The second was anger, old and heavy. He'd chosen to drop me at mile marker 22, and now he was sending me scavenger hunt clues? Still, the yellow folder. I could picture it. I'd put it there myself when I sorted the paperwork in March. The day Mara's name slid out of our lives like a snake through grass. I'd labeled it Sayar, title and loan. The car was in my name, purchased when Caleb's last transmission refused to transmit anything but despair. I'd made him promise to make the payments. He'd missed 2, bank error, then 3, paycheck delay, then 4. You know how it is, Mom? I knew how it is. It is the way it always is until someone decides it isn't. My coffee had gone cold. I drank it anyway. I made a list on the back of a napkin because paper makes things real. Suspend Mara's line Friday midnight. Cancel autopay to utilities. Done. Call landlord about guarantor revocation. Monday, 9 a.m. Retrieve yellow folder. Sunday, during their dinner. Print statements. Highlight amounts. Buy 3 manila envelopes. Label truth. Sunday came gray and heavy. The kind of sky that sits low enough to rest its elbows on your shoulders. The motel room smelled faintly of the powdered creamer I'd been shaking into coffee all week. My list was on the nightstand, the corner bent where I'd been turning it over in my hands, reading it like scripture. Today was the welcome back dinner, family only. Mara's post had been buzzing in my mind like a mosquito you can't swat. I didn't have to check it again to know the details. 6 p.m., 12 RSVPs, table for royalty. I checked out at noon sharp. The clerk didn't ask questions. He just slid my deposit across the counter in cash and nodded like we shared some unspoken truth. Maybe we did. In the parking lot, I unlocked my car. The one Caleb drove more than I did, and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. The glove box still had the insurance card in my name. A folded Target receipt poked out from the side, dated 3 days ago. Whoever had been driving had bought champagne, eucalyptus garland, and 3 boxes of artisan crackers. Party shopping list, courtesy of my credit. I pressed the start button. The engine turned over like it wanted to be somewhere else. I pointed it toward the duplex. Their street looked the same as it had when I left 6 days earlier. Narrow, lined with maples whose leaves had been swept into obedient piles by someone with more free time than me. The house itself looked smug. A fresh wreath hung on the door, red ribbons spilling down like it had something to celebrate. The curtains in the living room were open, showing just enough of the dining table to confirm my memory. Gold-rimmed plates, wine glasses catching the light, the centerpiece like a florist's fever dream. I parked 2 houses down and waited. People were arriving in clusters, arms full of bottles and foil-covered casseroles. Air kisses on the porch. Mara at the door in a dress the color of old money. Hair swept up like she'd been painted for the occasion. Caleb beside her in the suit I'd bought him for job interviews. Tie just loose enough to say he belonged there. When the last guest stepped inside, I slid out of my car, keeping low along the fence line until I reached the side gate. The padlock was new, but the fence wasn't. The slats were just far enough apart that I could reach through and flip the latch from the inside. The backyard smelled faintly of rosemary and grilling meat. Voices floated through the open kitchen window, clinking cutlery, the low thrum of polite conversation. I moved along the siding to the back door. Still the same lock as when I'd left, still the same scuff mark on the frame where I'd once kicked it shut in the rain. My key slid in like it had been waiting. The kitchen was empty, a neat war zone of prep dishes stacked in the sink. The counter gleamed, granite catching the overhead light in tiny constellations. My eyes flicked automatically to the hall closet. The yellow folder was there, right where Caleb's text had said, top shelf, behind a shoebox labeled winter scarves. I pulled it down, heart steady in a way it hadn't been in days. Inside, the car title still in my name. Loan statements, each marked past due in red ink. A payment log with months of zeros in the received column. The most recent notice was dated last week. Final warning before repossession. I slipped the folder into my tote and added 3 envelopes from the kitchen desk drawer. On the outside of each, I wrote in block letters, truth. From the dining room came the sound of glasses being filled. I glanced through the archway. 12 people seated, Mara at the head like she'd been crowned. Caleb poured wine into Catherine Holloway's glass, the widow of Mara's old boss, while her brother Evan leaned in to say something that made Mara laugh too loud. My feet carried me forward before I'd made the decision. Evening, I said from the threshold. Heads turned. Forks paused mid-air. Mara's smile froze. "What are you doing here?" she said, her voice just a shade higher than polite. "Delivering something," I said, holding up the envelopes. I walked around the table, placing one in front of each guest. Some light reading for after dessert. Caleb half rose from his chair. "Mom, this isn't. This is exactly the time," I said, my tone low but carrying. "You're all here, you're all family, by blood or choice, and family should know the truth." Evan Holloway flipped open his envelope first. His eyes scanned the first page. Loan statements, my name at the top, Caleb's missed payments marching down in neat rows. "This is," he trailed off. "Evidence," I supplied, "of who really owns the car your sister's been driving. Of the bills I've been paying while being told I don't belong in this house." A murmur started around the table. Catherine looked at Mara, who was already on her feet. "You need to leave," she said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. "Not until I've finished." Check the second page, utility bills in my name. Third page, phone plan. Notice the extra line? "That's for the woman hosting you tonight." Caleb's voice broke in, sharper now. "Mom, please." I looked at him, really looked. His shoulders were tight, his eyes darting between me and Mara like he was deciding which lifeboat to jump into. "You sent me a message," I said. "Told me to check the yellow folder." "You knew." He swallowed but didn't deny it. "Why?" I asked. "Not for me. For him. Why send me that if you weren't ready for this?" "Because..." His voice cracked. "Because I didn't know how else to make it stop." The room went still. Mara's mask slipped then, just a flicker. A flash of the same expression she'd worn the night she told me gluten-free bread was $9 a loaf and handed me the grocery list. "You're making a scene," she hissed. I smiled, small and sharp. "No, I'm making a record." I left the last envelope on the head of the table in front of Mara. She didn't touch it. Then I turned, walked back through the kitchen, and let myself out the way I came. The night air was cold on my face, the kind that makes you aware of every inch of your skin. In the car, I sat with the engine off, watching the windows of the duplex glow like a stage set. Inside, shadows moved, heads bent over papers, voices raised just enough to carry through the glass. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. Whatever happened next was theirs to manage. Mine was still coming. The yellow folder sat on the passenger seat, the car title peeking out like it was eager to go home. And I knew exactly where I'd be taking it tomorrow morning. Monday morning smelled like metal and rain. I'd been up since 5:30, not because I had somewhere to be that early, but because my brain had been running laps in the dark, reviewing the order of steps like a general before battle. Step 1, coffee. Step 2, yellow folder. Step 3, bank. The yellow folder sat on the motel desk, the title's crisp white edges almost glowing in the weak winter light. 2015 Toyota Corolla. Registered owner, Elaine Hart. That name, my name, had been printed in clean DMV ink, not the smeared pencil notes Mara favored on her shopping lists. At 8:01 a.m., I pulled into Spokane Credit Union's parking lot. A gust of wind shoved me toward the glass doors like even the weather wanted me inside. The loan officer, a man in his 40s with the kind of haircut that tries to look like no haircut at all, took one glance at the title and the payment log and raised his eyebrows. "You're the sole owner," he said. "Yes. And you'd like to?" Transfer the car out of his possession, I said. Today. He tapped at his keyboard, the muted clack sounding like distant gunfire. You're in luck. For months, delinquent means we've already initiated repossession. With your authorization, we can expedite. There was a form, of course. There's always a form. I signed where the yellow sticky note told me to. Dated it, slid it back across the desk. Someone will pick it up within 72 hours, he said, folding the papers into a neat stack. We'll notify you when it's secured. Then you can decide whether to sell or keep it. Keep, I said. The word felt solid. The rest of the day moved like water through narrow pipes. I called the landlord next, left a polite voicemail explaining my decision to revoke the guarantor agreement on Caleb's lease. 60 days notice, effective today, I said, reading the clause from my photocopy. I imagined the sound the landlord would make when he reached that line in my email attachment, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled without effort. Next, the phone carrier. I suspended Mara's line as planned. Midnight Friday. The representative, a young woman with a voice like she'd just come from choir practice, asked if I wanted to remove her entirely. Not yet, I said. Let's leave her thinking it's a technical glitch. By afternoon, I was back in my own kitchen. My house still smelled faintly of lemon cleaner from the last time I'd scrubbed it top to bottom. Before I knew I wouldn't be coming home from Caleb's, I set the yellow folder on the counter and made tea. While the kettle hummed, I opened my laptop and started typing. A list of every expense I'd covered in the last 3 years. Rent, utilities, insurance, the champagne and crackers incident. By the time the steam curled out of my mug, the total had reached $34,000. Then I opened a new tab and typed, Holloway Clinic Donor Gala 2024. There it was, this Saturday, the Foundry. Cocktail attire, photo ops, a silent auction. Attendees include Evan Holloway and Administrative Coordinator Mara Brooks. There was a photo of last year's event. Mara in a sequined gown, Caleb at her side looking like he'd been airbrushed into someone else's life. A thought slid into place like a bead on a string. At 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Caleb. We need to talk. Can you meet me? I stared at it. I didn't want to meet him, not yet, not when I could still taste the air from the side of that highway. Then another, please. Mara's saying you embarrassed her in front of everyone. She's furious. I don't know what to do. I typed, figure it out, then deleted it, then typed, Wednesday noon, my place. Let him wait 2 days. Let him feel that space. Evening came early, the sky bruising to purple before I'd finished dinner. I was washing dishes when the phone rang, a number I didn't recognize but local. This is Brad from Hunter Recovery, the voice said. Just wanted to let you know we've secured your vehicle. It's on our lot. You can pick it up tomorrow morning after 10. I dried my hands and leaned against the counter, the heat from the dishwater still in my fingers. Thank you, I said, meaning it. I hung up and imagined the moment. Mara, keys in hand, pressing the unlock button to nothing. Caleb, checking the street, seeing the empty space where the Corolla had been. The look they'd give each other, and the silence that would follow. I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey and took it to the porch. The night was cold enough to bite, but I stayed until the glass was empty, watching the street, thinking about Saturday's gala. If Mara wanted a stage, I'd give her one. Only this time, she wouldn't control the script. The morning the Corolla came home, the air was so clear it felt scrubbed. Sunlight hit the frost on the grass, turning it into a million pinpricks of glass. I pulled into Hunter Recovery's lot at exactly 10:05, yellow folder on the passenger seat, driver's license in my pocket. Brad, the man who'd called me the night before, was leaning against the office doorframe. Thought you might be early, he said, holding out a clipboard. The Corolla sat in the far corner, a little dustier than when I'd last driven it, but otherwise unchanged. I could almost hear the echo of Caleb's boots on the pavement, the fumbling way he'd always tossed the keys into his palm. Keys are inside, Brad said. We towed it from a duplex over on Maple. Lady came out when we were hooking it up, dark hair, long dress. Not happy. Mara, I said, She said she was calling the police. I told her to go ahead. We had the paperwork. I smiled, small and real. Bet that went over well. The interior smelled faintly of eucalyptus and expensive perfume. In the back seat, a gym bag lay unzipped. Inside, a sequin dress in deep green, a pair of gold heels, and a manila envelope labeled gala schedule. I didn't touch the dress, but I slid the envelope into my tote. The schedule confirmed what I'd read online. Cocktail hour at 6:30, speeches at 7:15, silent auction ending at 8 o'clock. The list of donors included half the people Mara had tried to impress at her family-only dinner. I drove the car home with the windows down despite the cold. Every turn of the engine felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. At noon, I got a text from Caleb. What happened to the car? Mara says it's been stolen. Not stolen, I wrote back. Recovered. Recovered from what? From misuse. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No reply. I spent the afternoon in my living room with the yellow folder spread across the coffee table. I added copies of the utility bills, the phone plan, the lease guarantee letter. In the corner of each page, I wrote the date and the amount in red ink. By the time I was done, the stack looked less like paperwork and more like an autopsy. Then I opened the gala schedule again. The back page had a seating chart. Table 3, Evan Holloway, Catherine Holloway, plus guest, likely Mara. Table 7, Dr. Pruitt, head of pediatrics. Table 9, Mayor Lincoln and wife. It wasn't just a fundraiser. It was the room, the place where reputations were cemented and shredded in equal measure. That night I called Rosa. She was one of the few friends I had left from before Caleb and Mara's drama had swallowed whole weekends. You still have that black dress from your niece's wedding? I asked. I do. And it still fits, unlike me, she said, laughing. Why? I need to borrow it. And maybe those pearl earrings. What are you up to? I sipped my tea, letting the pause carry its own weight. Let's just say I'm going to a party. The next morning, I parked 2 blocks from the duplex, just to see. The Corolla's absence was a hollow in their driveway, framed by 2 oil stains and a single crushed soda can. The blinds were half closed, but I caught movement. Mara pacing, phone to her ear, one hand slicing the air like she was conducting an orchestra only she could hear. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I drove away before she could spot me. Saturday night, Spokane's foundry glowed like it had been polished for the occasion. Strings of lights draped across the brick facade. A red carpet rolled out over the icy sidewalk, heaters hissing in the cold. I parked the Corolla 2 streets away, locked it twice, and walked the last block with my head high and Rosa's black dress cutting a clean line through the wind. Inside, the air was a heady mix of perfume, wine, and the faint tang of catered hors d'oeuvres. Waiters in black vests carried trays of champagne flutes, each one fizzing like it knew it was part of something important. A string quartet's notes floated from the corner, delicate enough to make people lean in to hear each other. I checked my coat, smoothed the dress, and stepped into the main hall. Round tables were set in precise arcs, each topped with white linens, gold-rimmed china, and floral centerpieces that looked like they'd been plucked from the cover of a lifestyle magazine. A dais sat at the far end, ready for speeches. Table 3 was near the center. Evan Holloway already occupied his seat, talking to a city councilman on his left. Catherine sat beside him, her pearls catching the light with every turn of her head. And then there was Mara, hair swept into a perfect chignon, emerald dress hugging her like it had been made for her alone. Caleb was at her side, suit crisp, tie knotted just right. They hadn't seen me yet. I approached from behind and placed my homemade place card between the water glasses at the empty seat beside Catherine, reserved for the truth. When Catherine turned and saw me lowering myself into the chair, her expression went from polite confusion to something colder. "Excuse me," she began. "I'm Elaine Hart," I said softly, smiling as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Caleb's mother." Mara's spine stiffened. Caleb's eyes widened, his hand hovering mid-reach for a bread roll. "What are you doing here?" Mara asked, her voice sugar over steel. I'm here to support the Holloway Clinic, I said, taking a sip of my water. And to make sure the right stories get told. Cocktail hour blurred past in a hum of clinking glasses and polite laughter. I kept my focus on my bread plate, but I could feel Mara's glances like static against my skin. At 7:15, the lights dimmed slightly, and Evan took the podium. He spoke about the clinic's mission, the year's accomplishments, the generosity of the donors. Applause rose and fell in tidy waves. Then Mara stood, her emerald dress catching the spotlight. As administrative coordinator, she began, I've had the honor of seeing firsthand how this community comes together for a worthy cause. She went on about programs, outreach, and the importance of family. I let her voice wash over me until she said it. Family is who supports you, through thick and thin. That was my cue. I reached into my tote and pulled out the manila envelope marked Truth. Without a word, I slid it across the table toward Catherine. She glanced at it, then at me. What is this? She asked. Documentation, I said, of exactly how I've been supporting your administrative coordinator. Catherine opened it. The first page, utility bills in my name, all addressed to the duplex Mara and Caleb shared. The second, phone plan statements, Mara's line highlighted in yellow. The third, car title, my name printed at the top. The fourth, loan payment logs with months of zeros under Caleb's name. She read quickly, eyes narrowing. She passed the stack to Evan without a word. He read slower, his expression flattening. From the podium, Mara continued her speech, unaware that the room at table 3 had shifted. Caleb had stopped looking at her and was watching his father-in-law's face instead. When Evan set the papers down, his gaze cut straight to Mara. She faltered mid-sentence. What? She asked, still into the microphone. Evan's voice was low but carried. We'll talk later. Murmurs rippled across nearby tables. Mara tried to recover, her smile tightening. As I was saying. But the thread was gone. When the applause came, it was thinner. She returned to the table, cheeks flushed, smile brittle. You've really outdone yourself, Elaine, she said, leaning in so only I could hear. Do you enjoy humiliating people? Only the ones who think my silence is permanent, I said. Her nails drummed against the tablecloth. You think this will hurt me? You're nothing here. I smiled, slow and sure. Maybe. But now they know whose name is on everything you used to look important. And in rooms like this, perception is everything. Dinner came. I ate every bite, unhurried, while Mara pushed her food around her plate. Caleb said nothing, but when the dessert plates were cleared, he slipped a folded napkin into my lap under the table. Inside, I didn't know she was using your name for the utilities. I'll fix it. I didn't write back. Fixing it wasn't the point anymore. When the silent auction closed at 8, I stood, thanked Catherine for her company, and walked out without my coat. The cold hit me like truth, sharp, bracing, and necessary. Behind me, through the hall's open doors, I heard the swell of conversation rise again. Only this time Mara's laugh didn't cut through it. The gala had been her stage. Now it was her echo chamber. And I wasn't finished yet. Sunday morning brought the kind of stillness that comes only after a storm. No wind, no traffic. Even the neighborhood dogs seemed to have taken a vow of silence. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee cooling beside the yellow folder, rereading the note Caleb had slipped me at the gala. I didn't know she was using your name for the utilities. I'll fix it. That word, fix, was a loose screw rattling around in my head. Fixing implied something could be made like new. This couldn't. You can't make a shirt look brand new after years of being worn as someone else's napkin. At 9:02 a.m., my phone rang. Caleb. I let it go to voicemail. He tried again at 9:10, then 9:18. On the third try, I answered. I can't believe you did that, he said, skipping any greeting. You mean show people the truth? You humiliated her in front of the entire board. Evan's furious. He says she's off the committee until they review her conduct. She brought that on herself. She says you're lying. Then she should have no problem proving it. There was a pause. Look, I'm not saying what she did was right. Then what are you saying? That there are better ways to handle family problems. This stopped being a family problem the second she started using my name to build her reputation. I said, you should be thanking me for getting you out of the blast radius. Another pause. His breathing was uneven. She's not going to let this go. Neither am I. By Monday, the calls from Caleb slowed, replaced by texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Some were blunt. You should be ashamed of yourself. And some were subtler, wrapped in feigned concern. Elaine, maybe you should get help for your anger. I recognized Mara's touch in all of them. Plausible deniability wrapped around a blade. At 2 p.m., a private number called. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Elaine. Mara's voice was flat now. None of the false brightness she usually lacquered over her words. You've made your point. That you can't use me without consequences? Yes, I have. You've also damaged Caleb's standing with the Holloways. Evan won't recommend him for that job at the clinic anymore. Good, I said. He should get a job he earns on his own. This isn't about you and your morals, she snapped. This is about knowing your place. You've embarrassed people who matter in this town. I almost laughed. And you think you still matter to them? Her silence was short but sharp. You'll regret this, she said finally, and hung up. That night, I started on my next move. I pulled out every statement from the past year, credit cards, bank accounts, the phone bill, and circled anything that traced back to Caleb and Mara. The total for the last 12 months alone was $14,632. I printed each statement and organized them by month. Then I wrote a letter, to whom it may concern. I am disputing charges and accounts fraudulently opened or used without my consent by Mara Brooks and or Caleb Hart. Enclosed are supporting documents, including utility bills, telecommunications accounts, and vehicle loan records in my name, but for which I did not authorize use. I didn't need to send it yet. Just knowing it was ready felt like placing a loaded tool in my own hand. Wednesday afternoon, I went to the grocery store. In the produce aisle, I saw Mrs. Klein from the hardware store. She hesitated when she recognized me, then leaned in. I heard what happened at the gala, she said quietly. Good for you. I blinked. You heard. Everyone's heard. People are talking about how you stood up to her. Half of them are calling you petty, but the other half are saying they wish they'd had the guts to do the same to their own freeloaders. I thanked her and moved on, but the words stuck. Half the town now had an opinion. That was leverage if I wanted it. That evening, Caleb showed up at my door. He didn't knock like someone comfortable. He knocked like a man hoping the person inside might not answer. I let him in. She's gone, he said, standing in my living room like it might collapse. Packed a bag and went to stay with a friend. Because she's embarrassed? Because Evan froze her out. No more committee, no more clinic perks. She's blaming me for not warning her you'd be at the gala. Did you warn her? He shook his head. I didn't even know until I saw you sit down. We sat in silence. Finally, he said, I don't know what happens next. You get a job. You pay your own bills. You learn to live without her approval. And you, I'm going to make sure she doesn't land on her feet the way she expects to. Before bed, I checked Mara's Facebook page. It had been quiet since the gala. No photos, no updates, just a new profile picture of a mountain vista with no people in it. But her friend list was still public. That was useful. I started taking notes, names, mutual connections, workplaces. By midnight, I had a list of 6 people who'd commented supportively on her old posts and whose employers would be very interested in certain financial documents I possessed. This wasn't about ruining her for sport. It was about making sure she couldn't find another Caleb to fund her life. The cracks in her facade were widening. My job now was to make sure they didn't get patched. And I already knew the next place I'd apply pressure. It was sitting 3 blocks away, behind the duplex thin walls, on the landlord's desk. My signed guarantee. 54 days until it expired. Plenty of time to let her sweat. Monday began with paper and ended with proof. At 8:59 a.m., I stood in Mr. Patel's narrow office between a ficus and a space heater that sounded like it was learning to whistle. He slid his glasses down his nose and read the letter I'd typed the night before. 60 days notice to revoke guarantor, he said, tapping the clause I'd underlined. Effective today. Yes. He looked at me over the rims. You understand what this means. If your son and Ms. Brooks do not secure a new guarantor or meet our income criteria, they'll be in breach. I understand. His sigh was more sympathy than annoyance. I've seen this before, he said softly. Not the details, the shape. People who think other people are credit cards with legs. He signed the acknowledgement, stamped it with the kind of thud that feels final, and handed me a copy. Certified receipt will go out this afternoon. On my way out, I passed the bulletin board, snowman clip art, no smoking, and a sheet titled Tenant Resources. Half the numbers were for things like budgeting classes and legal aid. I memorized too. By 10:15, I was at my kitchen table with 3 phones lined up. Landline, cell, and the ancient flip phone I keep for storms because it always gets a signal when the world doesn't. I called the credit bureaus and placed a fraud alert, then a freeze. I called the utility company and scheduled the account to close out in my name on the 30th, transfer contingent on their signatures. The representative offered me a loyalty discount. I declined, feeling a loyalty to myself I hadn't felt in years. At noon, I slid the Corolla's title into a protective sleeve and put it in the fireproof box under my bed. Small rituals matter. They tell your spine which direction is up. At 2:20, my phone lit with a number I didn't know. Elaine Hart, a woman's voice professional. This is Lisa from Holloway Clinic HR. Mr. Holloway asked me to follow up regarding some irregularities related to a staff member's expense submissions. Which staff member? I asked, though I already knew. Ms. Brooks, she said. We found mileage reimbursements for a vehicle registered to you. We'd like to schedule a time to take a statement if you're willing. I thought of Mara's emerald dress catching the gala lights, her speech about family, the way her laugh had thinned when Catherine saw the papers. I'm willing. Tomorrow at 10? Tomorrow at 10. After I hung up, I went to the sink and washed an apple like it had personally offended me. I ate it over the counter, the sweet snap loud in the quiet house. It tasted like something that wasn't quite victory and wasn't quite relief. Call it traction. The 3:07, Caleb texted. She says you're sabotaging her career. She says you want her homeless. I typed back, I want my name off things I'm not using. 3 dots. She's looking for a new guarantor. Might ask Evan's sister. Says it's just paperwork. Heard, I wrote. Also, landlord received revocation. 60 days. Nothing for 6 minutes. Then mom. Okay. 2 hours later, my doorbell rang. I expected a package. It was Evan Holloway. He wasn't the man from the dais. He was a person in a dark coat clutching a folder and an apology. Ms. Hart, he said, I won't take much of your time. I let him in because he didn't try to force the door with his resume. He stood in my kitchen as if uncertain where to place his hands. I'm sorry for what you've been through, he said. I'm also sorry our institution inadvertently enabled it. He set the folder on the table. Inside, copies of mileage claims, purchases, a staff badge request stamped rush with my address typed in the field labeled permanent mailing. My address. We'll be reversing these, he said. And to be blunt, Ms. Brooks is on leave pending investigation. He waited for me to be magnanimous. I wasn't. I appreciate the follow-up, I said. I'm not interested in a headline. I'm interested in a boundary. You have one now, he said. His gaze softened just a fraction. You gave my staff a necessary lesson about vetting charm. Charm is cheap, I said. Interest is what costs. When he left, evening sloped down outside the windows. I made lentil soup and ate it at the table with the yellow folder, the certified mail stub, and 3 stamped envelopes addressed to the credit bureaus. The soup steamed like a small weather system I could control. By 8, my phone was a bruise of notifications. 2 blocked calls. 1 message from a friend of a friend. Mara asked if she could crash on my couch. Should I say yes? I typed, your couch, your call. But she used my name to open things. Keep your own name out of hers. Pause, then copy that. At 9, Mara's number flashed. I let it ring. She texted instead. You can freeze me out, but you can't erase me. He'll choose me in the end. He always does. I placed the phone face down on the table and looked at the ceiling until I could breathe like a person again. Tuesday morning at HR, the conference room smelled like toner and regret. Lisa clicked a recorder on and set it between us. Do you consent to this conversation being recorded? She asked. I did. I told them everything I could corroborate with paper. I did not editorialize. I did not embellish. When I finished, Lisa switched off the recorder and said, Thank you. Evan walked me to the elevator himself. When the doors slid open, he said, You taught us something. I taught myself, I said. You all just got to watch. He almost smiled. Fair enough. Back in the lobby, a volunteer table had a stack of flyers for a winter coat drive. Mara's name was still printed at the bottom as Contact. A staffer was peeling them off with a staple remover, one by one, like labels off jars. At 1:03 p.m., Mr. Patel called. We delivered the certified notice, he said. Ms. Brooks signed for it. Thank you. She asked what happens if they can't provide a new guarantor. You tell her the lease says what the lease says, I replied. Silence on the line, then a small chuckle. It does indeed. In the afternoon, I drove past the duplex. The driveway held a different car. A dented Civic I recognized as belonging to a woman named Trina, one of Mara's sisters from her yoga studio. I did not stop. I did not honk. I did note the time and the license plate out of habit I hadn't realized I had. At home, I made a list on a fresh legal pad. Fraud alert and freeze. Done. Utilities scheduled to transfer or close. Done. HR statement given. Done. Landlord notice confirmed. Done. Letters to bureaus posted. Tomorrow. Inventory of what remains at duplex. Saturday. Speak to Caleb about plan for 60 days. Soon. I put the pen down. My hand ached. It felt like I'd been writing a letter to a future version of myself and mailing it from here. Around 5, Caleb called. She says you met with Evan, he said. I did. She says you're trying to get her fired. She got herself investigated, I said. I handed them a map. She's scared, he said. And there it was, his reflex, the urge to cushion her landing at the expense of his own bones. Mine. So am I said. We're just afraid of different things. What are you afraid of? That you'll learn nothing. Silence. Then, softer. What if I already am? After we hung up, I went to check the mailbox. Inside was a manila envelope with no return address, just my name in block letters. I carried it to the kitchen, set it on the table, and stared at it the way you stare at a dog you've just realized isn't friendly. Inside, a single photo, glossy, for by 6. Me, on the side of Highway 92, hand on the Corolla's door, light going copper through the trees. It had been taken from an angle I hadn't known existed. Farther down the shoulder, low, like the person had crouched. On the back, 3 words in Sharpie. Stop. Or else. I stood very still. The house made a settling noise, the way old houses do when weather crosses a threshold. I turned the photo over again. In the top left corner, a smear of something dark, almost like oil from a glove. And in the far background, a slice of another car's bumper, chrome catching light. Mara loved stages. But this wasn't her handwriting. This was a different kind of theater. Not the kind with audiences. The kind with warnings. I put the photo back in the envelope, slid it into the fireproof box next to the title, and locked it. Then I sat at my table, poured myself a glass of water, and watched the surface stop trembling. 60 days. Boundaries. Paper. Proof. And now a shadow I hadn't expected. If my son had pulled over for only one reason, I was suddenly certain I didn't know it yet. 2 days after the envelope, I found myself driving past Highway 92. Not to reenact it, no appetite for melodrama, but because sometimes you have to stand in the exact place where something cracked to see the shape of the break. The shoulder looked the same. Gravel, ditch, pines crowding the sky. But now I noticed the pull-off across the way, half hidden by brush, big enough for a car to tuck into. From there, someone could have watched the whole scene without me seeing them. The Corolla's tires crunched as I pulled over. I stepped out, cold air pressing into my lungs. The ditch grass bent low, winter stiff, revealing flattened patches like something, or someone, had been here recently. In one patch, a glint of chrome, a fragment of bumper trim, jagged where it had been snapped off. My fingers itched to pocket it, but I took a photo instead, the way you'd photograph a bruise before it fades. Back home, I laid the new photo beside the one from the envelope. Same chrome curve, same faint dent just before the seam. Someone hadn't just been passing by that day. They'd parked, waited, and aimed a camera. Mara? Too obvious. Caleb? Too cowardly. Which left someone else with a stake in me being out of that house. At 4:30, Caleb came by, eyes sunken. "She's gone," he said. "I know. No, gone. Packed everything, left town. Didn't even tell me where. Do you want me to pretend to be surprised?" He rubbed his face. She said it wasn't her idea to leave you on the road. She said someone told me to." The words hung there. "Told you to?" I repeated. "She said they showed me something. A file. About you." "What file?" "I don't know. His voice caught. "I don't remember it clearly. Just the feeling. Like if I didn't do what they said, something bad would happen." It would have been easy to dismiss this as Mara's parting mind game. But the photo in my fireproof box said otherwise. "Caleb," I said, steady, "you're going to remember. And when you do, you're going to tell me exactly who parked across from Highway 92. He nodded, but I could tell he was still afraid. Just not of Mara anymore. That night, I opened the box, took out the threatening photo, and slipped it into a new envelope with the bumper fragment picture. On the front, I wrote in black ink, "If you're watching, watch this." I didn't mail it. Not yet. But it sat on my desk like a promise. One I'd keep as soon as I knew whose shadow I was stepping into. 60 days was enough to take back my name, my credit, my car. But whoever had staged that roadside goodbye had just given me a second deadline. And I was already counting down.